Your Excellency, Honorable Prime Minister, Tasho Chair, Tasho Secretaries and Commission members, and my dear colleagues, at the outset, I would like to extend our deep appreciation for reposing the trust to be the first, whether you call it organization, whether you call it agency, for gracing this Zhiyog Droezom of its first kind. So without much further ado, I'm just standing in front of you all to present our part of the narratives. In all the discourses, in all the dialogues, often than not, whether it's the roadmap, whether it's the national important agenda, there's one common denominator. I draw the parallels. It's not the leadership, it's the energy that is a bedrock of our national economy. So in this setting a context, I'll be taking us through this transformative journey. In that, I'll try to introduce the sector is all about. As far as the energy sector is concerned, we have received, to count the last year's National Assembly Royal Address, we have received 3 key mandates. As you can see, the first mandate is basically talking about converting the hydropower as a national strategic resources, where by harnessing the benefits should actually accrue to the entire people of Bhutan. I emphasize this because there is a connotation in the due course of my presentation. And then the second part in His Majesty's address during the 116th National Day emphasized again that energy as one of the key pillars for the success of GMC, that we have to leverage on our abundant resources. Unlike in the past, hydropower should not be construed as just simply a revenue earner, but more so as a catalyst for promulgating the investments. And then, of course, during the 170th National Day, Majesty has been absolutely clear in terms of who is going to do this. It's all of us at the end of the day. And Honorable Prime Minister has just touched upon that situation in terms of how we should build the enlightened entrepreneurial bureaucratic system in a time-bound manner. We have just given 10 years. So the larger question is, what is the energy security? It actually varies from countries to continents to every single sort of a person. But what's important for Bhutan is energy security is tantamounts to providing accessible, reliable, affordable and sustainable energy for its own development and for the well-being of its people. Today we have in excess of 3,500 megawatts. It's taken 60 more years, rather painful years. And juxtapose in terms of what is our resources. We are talking in terms of hydropower alone in excess of 38, by way of actually defining those parameters in terms of theoretical potential in excess of 38,000 megawatts. And we have assessed techno-economically, we are looking at 33,000 megawatts. And in last 60 years, we have been able to achieve only 3,500 megawatts. That's less than 11% of the resources. So the sooner we harness these resources, we'll be able to achieve the royal vision situation. And of course, the larger question is, are we on the right track in terms of what is the energy, a new energy sort of landscape? Our energy landscape is rather steep with tremendous opportunity, a terrain rich with possibilities to innovate, diversify and empower future. With the growing sort of demand, as early as historically, those the green and red lines is a very important sort of indicator, in that the red one basically shows about the demand in terms of the peak firm demand. The green one is essentially talking about what resources, what capability do we have in order to meet that sort of a demand. And historically, when you look at it, those two are running parallel, and that's a deliberate measure at the end of the day. So much to Suffice to mention that whatever energy demand growth that has happened in the past is a deliberate attempt on our part to curtail, because the supplier may bachin that how we are going to meet the demands in the, but with the transformation that we all have embarked on, the market is reciprocating in terms of the growth. The bigger question is then, with the kind of widening gap between that red and green lines, and that's a growing concern moving forward. And how do we sort of ensure that, as I've defined the energy security for us, as an interim measure, for the first time ever since 2022, we have started importing from India, especially during the lean season for a good 4-5 months. Now that has a problem. First, the availability, because it has a context in terms of the political will, also in terms of the price, also in terms of the availability. Because as you must have also heard and seen that India is going to become a superpower. So therefore, this idea that whatever we can generate, we consume, whatever we cannot generate, we import and supply easier said than done. It has impinged on our balance of payment. And very importantly, 70% of the energy mix from the India constitutes of fossil fuels. We have declared to vote as a first carbon negative country. And in fact, this is going to be a challenge moving forward, whether that sort of an import dependency will actually impinge on our carbon neutrality. This slide, I want to emphasize only 2 points. The idea that if we have remained business as usual, that's the yellow straight line situation. When we are looking at 2,500 megawatts as our peak committed demand. Even by that sort of measures, we will continue to have deficit up until 2034. Whereas, as Majesty has commanded, we cannot stay there. We have to move forward. So in that, much of the growing demand, especially from the digital economy side, if we incorporate that, then we are easily looking at 5,000 megawatts as our peak demand. And this has a context in terms of why we are setting 25,000 megawatts as our national target. So invariably, because of the seasonality issues of hydropower, in winter it goes as low as 20%. Assuming that we secure the energy by meeting the 5,000 through our own generations, we'll still have to have, in order to meet that 20%, through that 20%, we got to achieve 5,000. So then that takes us to 25,000 megawatts. This is an important slide in terms of what Majesty has commanded, that hydropower is not just the revenue generator, but rather it's the enabler or the catalyst for the accelerated growth. So far, we have been claiming that hydropower contributes in excess of 20%, as high as 40% of the national exchequer. But because of the increase in our domestic demand, typically from where we used to export in excess of 70-80% of our surplus energy, this has dwindled down to as low as 32%. And moving forward for the next couple of years, this is going to go further down. Only after adding on or augmenting the generation capacities will be on the trajectory in that we'll be able to sort of reinforce the idea of actually exporting a surplus energy situation. So in a nutshell, this is what we have actually slated for the energy sector. In that, as I mentioned, with the current capacity of 3,500 megawatts, in about 4 years from now, we should be touching that as high as 5,000 megawatts. And then for the next 5-year plan, we have set an ambitious plan to achieve in excess of 15,000 megawatts. And then after 2034, we still have to continue. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this is, as I've shown in the previous slide, that the growth, the accelerated growth, going beyond the conventional industries, we have to secure energy situation. So by 2040 site, we should be having in excess of 25,000 megawatts. But in between, I also would like to emphasize that if we simply rely on hydropower, as I mentioned, anywhere from 20 to 80 to 20%, there's going to be a deficit. And then because of the long gestation periods of construction of hydropower, immediately we'll not be able to resolve that. So what's the option for us? Solar comes as a next. Therefore, we have kept ourselves a target to achieve 5,000 megawatts from solar. So it's a hybrid sort of a target that we have set for ourselves. Now, in order for us to achieve this ambitious target, I say ambitious both in terms of the scale, also in terms of the resources that will actually go into that. And the first sort of the barrier that we have addressed is through formulation of what I call as a game changer policy. And so during the panel discussion, my colleagues will be taking us through in terms of why I say that is a game changer. And then we are in the process of replacing the 25 years old Electricity Act, so as to be a future ready in terms of the regulatory regime, the legal regime. And then at the moment, all our energy informations, whether it's a fossil fuel, whether it's electricity, whether it's the biomass, it's all over the places. So this is the kind of ecosystem that we are trying to embark on to consolidate under what we call as a national energy information systems. And then of course, how are we going to achieve that? Through the enhanced institutional coordination. And for the first time ever that we have embarked on seriously engaging with our private sectors. And I must emphasize that design, built, being operated by Bhutanese Sochu hydropower, 18 megawatts, is done fully in-house. And of course, at the end, looking at the trajectory of where the markets are evolving, I meant from the energy perspective, that's where we are making a future ready in terms of creating a platform so that tomorrow, energy could be traded like any other commodity. And in that's where I see a tremendous opportunity as an individual, as an entrepreneur, as an agency, embracing that sort of opportunity situation. And I did mention about the target of 25,000 megawatts. 5,000 is already in making. But for the 20,000 megawatts alone, we are looking at $26 to $27 billion investment. And just to give you a reference, our current GDP, we are talking about less than $3 billion. So in next 10 to 15 years, we ought to mobilize 9 times of that GDP. So that is the bigger sort of a challenge that has been given to the energy sector. And we all know, as Prime Minister also alluded at, we are cash strapped. So where do we actually bring these resources? We have to outsource in many ways. And that's where our innovation, both in terms of creating a conducive sort of environment, regulatory, the legal sort of a basis, the contract basis, in that I'm sure my colleagues at a later point will also take us through in terms of the details of how we are actually doing that. But suffice to mention, all our resources, as I mentioned in the very beginning, hydropower is a strategic resources where the benefits must accrue to all of us. Easier said than done. Tomorrow, if we just open up and attract the private sector, we could easily do that in the next 5 to 10 years. But that's not the future that we would like to create. So therefore, much of our strategy actually beholds in terms of what sort of a regulatory, what sort of a financial mechanism that we are actually putting in place. So this is through the concession agreement, it's through the power purchase agreement, and then through the strategic power public-private partnership. And then the way we see, because when you talk about the energy, I think the first thing that comes to all of us in our mind is electricity, just to put on the switch and the light sort of glows. Actually, it's beyond the electricity situation. As an energy, as a nodal agency, that we are responsible for not just the electricity. The way we are actually looking at it cuts across 3 sort of schemes. One is that electricity. In that, if you read what I've just shown up there, it's all about empowering empowering every individual in that moving away from the conventional ways of doing business, that today there's a generator, there's a transmission distribution companies, one generates, one transmits, and we as a consumer. In fact, by this very sort of a strategy is to empower each and any individuals in terms of, let's say, putting up a solar on the rooftop. So tomorrow, every individual can become a producer in itself. So this concept of producing at the same time consuming, so the prosumer concept. And we are making inroads in terms of looking at how to secure the energy through pump storage schemes, the battery energy storage schemes. And then, of course, on the thermal side, thermal energy side, we are actually making inroads again there, looking at how best to sort of leverage on the free sun, the solar thermal energy. And then we are actually investigating the geothermal as well. And then making, again, from the demand side, making inroads in terms of introducing a standards and labeling so that the energy that we consume is effective, efficient. And then moving towards the future, the green hydrogen initiative. In fact, we have just launched that we are going to pilot this to the tune of around 1 megawatt or so. The idea being we'll use leverage on the hydropower and the abundance of the water to produce a green hydrogen, and we will be using that green hydrogen to fuel our mobility. And of course, we have actually given sort of forge into now moving into the future energy, whether it's a small modular reactors, or as a whole sort of a technology progresses towards a more advanced nuclear technology as well. And at the same time, in terms of the digital aspects, we ought to make our system energy management intelligent enough, because that's the future in terms of how to enhance the efficiency, how to enhance the effectiveness in managing our systems. Very recently, we have concluded a digital intervention for Green Power Corporation, that's a generating company. We are also looking at the information, integrating the information technology vis-a-vis with the operational technology for the Bhutan Power Corporation, and even for our oversight agencies like a regulator, for instance, going everything digital. And then for the system manager in terms of efficient, predictive sort of a predictive forecasting, because today we have come to a stage where even to sell electricity, unlike in the past, it has to be scheduled 15 minutes, 96 blocks, 24 hours ahead. And the next day, it gets actually vetted against what we have really sort of actually transmitted. And any deviations attracts a lot of penalties. So we have come to we are actually doing in a regime where everything is actually being managed in a meticulous sort of a planning basis. Just before I came, I did receive an email from GovTech. Honorable Prime Minister has launched the National AI Artificial Intelligence Strategy. And that's where our future is, moving away from the conventional industries to fuel the digital economy moving forward. And just to give a glimpse of how we are organized, so we sit within the ministry, which actually has the policy and planning sort of oversight, and we do have the independence of a regulator, and we also have a system operator who works 24/7 round the clock with the counterparts across the border. And then underneath we have the projects, the utilities, wood generation, distribution, and we have also added one more sort of a block in that is going to be independent power producers. And increasingly we are striving to promote this idea of renewable energy service provider. And I see a big sort of a opportunity in that, creating the green jobs. Today we engage in excess of 5,000 Bhutanese in managing this sector, and our target is to go as high as 10 to 15,000 in next 5 to 10 years. So in closing, in order for countries to power the country's future effectively and efficiently, the energy sector needs to be dynamic with the timely reforms, leading through innovations with uncompromising integrity. And in doing so, throughout our daily actions, we live with HM's vision to not only achieving the sector's goal, but also contributing significantly to the 10x economy. Thank you, Karichel.